Hello, friends, and let's get started.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. A warm summer evening was descending on the city, painting the streets with the yellowish-pink light of the setting sun. It was mid-July, and the heat reached 37 degrees Celsius during the day and eased slightly at night. The air conditioners were running at home, the cafes had fans running, and the streets were buzzing, even though it was past 8 in the evening. In a small, neat one-story house with a well-maintained front garden and a white gate, only one porch light was on. Standing by the front door, leaning against the jamb, was Jake, a 35-year-old man with strong arms and warm eyes. He was dressed in a homemade t-shirt and jeans, and next to him, on the step, his dog, a dachshund named Boston, was lazily looking around the yard. The yard smelled of cut grass, the scent of blooming petunias, and the slightly bitter smoke from the neighbor's grill. Jake looked at his wife, Alicia. She was 32, a nurse at Mercy Health, and night shifts had long been the norm. Alicia stood by the car, thoughtfully checking to make sure she had everything. She was wearing a blue medical coat held on by a thin belt and white sneakers. A thermos of coffee in her hand, a light bag with work clothes, and a notebook on her shoulder. A simple rubber band dangled neatly from her long blonde hair, and overall she looked like she was about to wave to her husband and go off to save someone's life. She turned to him and smiled cheerfully. "Don't stay too long on the computer. And don't forget to feed Boston," she said, winking at him. "I promise," Jake replied, smiling back at her. "Just don't overwork yourself out there." He watched her get into the car. Alicia always drove confidently, a little sporty, and liked loud music. This time there was radio jazz playing quietly in the cabin. He could distinguish some soft trumpets. After a moment, she slammed the door shut, waved to Jake through the window, and the car drove out of the yard, engine humming softly. Jake stood for a moment, watching the red taillights. Then he went into the house and sat down on the couch. There were pictures on the wall opposite the TV. Pictures of their honeymoon in California, pictures of their vacation at a huge pond near Tulsa, and a few professional photos from their wedding. Back then, Alicia had been wearing a simple, elegant white dress, her hair tied back in a light braid. Jake adored those memories, his wife's genuine smile, her laughter when one of the guests awkwardly dropped something or made a funny joke. He'd always thought their life was a solid, dependable structure, and in 6 years of marriage they'd hardly had any major fights. Kids? They kept putting it off, first because of Alicia's career, then because of Jake's car service opening. But there was romance in it. They lived enjoying each other until they felt ready to be parents. As Jake sank down on the couch and reached for his smartphone, it vibrated in his hand. The screen lit up. Trevor. It was his buddy, the one he'd once gone to tech school with. Trevor knew Alicia because his wife, Margot, worked at the same clinic but on the day shift. "Jake," Trevor began loudly. "Listen, we have a strange story here. Margot tells me that it seems that the night shift at the clinic has been canceled today. Because of a fire on one of the floors. Everything's been moved to the day shift, and the night shift is temporarily canceled until the repairs are done." Wait, Jake questioned. Alicia had just left for work. "Oh, here we go. I'm shocked myself. I asked Margot, and she confirmed, all the overnighters have been sent home, and no one will be here. Maybe Alicia just didn't know." "Thanks, Trevor. I'll try and find out." He turned off the phone and thought for a moment. The news was unpleasant. The fire at the clinic was serious, but Alicia certainly couldn't have missed such a message at work. They were usually told about any emergencies in advance. Jake didn't believe his wife had made a mistake or gotten her schedule mixed up. A chill of worry flashed through his soul, but he quickly brushed it away. "I'm sure it's fine. Maybe Trevor messed something up." After a few minutes, he began to replay the events of the last few days. Details popped into his head that he hadn't given much thought to before. For example, yesterday he'd smelled the pungent odor of someone else's perfume and tobacco smoke on Alicia's clothes. The nights in Tulsa were hot, and the clinic staff, especially the nurses, rarely smoked anywhere near their building, unless there were visitors. But the odor so permeated her uniform that it seemed odd. Or the text from Ron, "Chief," at 1:30 in the morning when Alicia was supposedly on duty. "I'll run through the wards and come back," she said then, and her phone kept flashing. Jake asked if something was wrong, and she abruptly tucked the phone under her pillow. Everything's fine, just an unusual patient situation. And another unusual detail. A couple weeks ago, he noticed a very elaborate set of lingerie in the laundry basket, certainly not the kind she usually wore to the clinic. Alicia had never been one for expensive things, so Jake had assumed it was a gift from her sister or something. But she never seemed to wear it in front of him. Maybe I'm missing something? Ran through his head. He rose abruptly from the couch, opened his phone, and skimmed through their recent correspondences with Alicia. The messages were short, mostly household phrases, and she always communicated about her work schedule dryly. Tonight's night shift 8 to 8. I'm in surgery today, don't call. An uneasy feeling spread in his chest, and Jake didn't like to ignore it. Determination overcame doubt. He called Boston, locked the house, and got into his pickup. He needed to check. What if Alicia was just unaware of the canceled duty and left by mistake? Or had Trevor gotten the wrong information? He drove to the Mercy Health Clinic. When he pulled up, he saw closed doors, locked gates, only a few cars looming on two sides, one of which belonged to security. The side of the night reception was dark, and the only visible light was the dim duty lamp in the lobby. Jake got out of the car and leaned against the wall. No one. No patients, no staff. There was a faint glow on the second floor, but the atmosphere seemed lifeless. He tried to call Alicia, dial tone, and no answer. He was beginning to lose patience. It was past midnight when Trevor called him again. A message flashed on the screen, and with it came a picture. Jake clicked on the picture, and his heart clenched painfully. It was a bar, the Silver Street Bar, where he'd taken his friends many times to celebrate events. In the shot, Alicia is in a tight black dress, sitting on the lap of a tall man in a white shirt. Several people surround them, clinking shots. He recognized the face of Alicia's friend. She also worked at that clinic. But this is what sticks in his mind the most. The man held a shot glass with tequila in his hand, and Alicia, laughing, drank directly from his hand, with her head tilted back. According to the caption to the photo, the man was Ron, her boss, Mercy Health's chief medical officer. And clearly he wasn't pretending they were just being friendly. In the silence of the streetlight, Jake could see every detail. Alicia's open lips, her half-open purse, Ron's hands on her shoulders. She seemed completely immersed in the atmosphere of the bar at the moment. It wasn't the clinic she'd gone to, and there was no night shift. Sorry, buddy, I didn't mean to be the one to bring bad news. But Margot saw them and sent them to me. Trevor texted. Jake stood staring at the screen for a long time. His chest felt like an iron hoop. Blood pounded in his temples. It felt like it was someone else's photo, some kind of stupid prank. But reality seemed to shift toward pain and betrayal. He clutched the phone, took a deep breath, and swallowed the lump in his throat with difficulty. Jake, are you okay there? Came another text from Trevor. He didn't answer it, turned around, and walked back to his car. He realized he didn't want to go looking for them right now, make a public scene, or retaliate. He needed to think about it, to think about how to even feel about what he had seen. So, one hot July evening in Tulsa, Jake's life came apart at the seams. He didn't go to the bar, call his wife, or have a fight in the driveway. He just got behind the wheel of his pickup truck, drove home, drove the car into the garage, and locked himself inside. Silence. Only Boston looked at him, a smart dog, as if sensing that his master was in a very bad place right now. And so, when Jake was alone in the empty house, the small things that he had once written off as his wife's fatigue, stress, the peculiarities of the job began to come back to him. The smell of someone else's tobacco on her uniform. A text message from Ron deep in the night. A sexy new set of lingerie he'd never seen her wear before. Delays after her shift for accountability. The slight nervousness she hid when Jake asked about her co-workers. He was beginning to realize it was all pieces of the same puzzle he didn't have the courage to put together. The clock read 2:17 a.m. when Alicia walked through the door. She hadn't noticed that Jake was in the kitchen. She just set her bag on the floor, sat down on a stool, and pulled her sneakers off her feet. She threw the shirt she'd thrown on over her robe off her shoulder and sighed heavily, then walked to the bedroom. She seemed to think everyone was asleep, and she didn't want to disturb anyone. But Jake wouldn't talk to her that night. He realized he wasn't ready for a conversation full of emotion, and he didn't want to say too much. In the morning, Alicia got up around 7. In the kitchen, she found her husband, who was already drinking coffee and looking out the window where a neighbor was busy near the fence, going fishing. Her eyes were lined, showing she hadn't slept well. Alicia reached up and rubbed her neck playfully. "I almost went crazy that night," she said and burst out laughing. "We had too many patients. I ran up and down the floors, my hands still shaking. I barely made it home. The coffee didn't help either." Jake turned to her. For a few moments he just stared, and she tried to smile. He noted that her makeup was surprisingly smooth for an exhausted night. But he remained silent, then quietly asked, "Are you sure you're only tired?" She frowned. "What's the matter?" "I'm fine. It's just that night shifts take a lot of energy." On the table was the very bag she had left with. The robe was neatly folded, with no signs of much wear. Her hair seemed a little tangled, but more from the evening's fun than from hard work. He looked up and looked directly into her eyes, and his scrutiny made her uncomfortable. She turned away and hurried to the refrigerator. Jake's heart clenched. He wanted to shout, "I know everything. Why are you lying?" But strangely, he didn't feel anger, more like bitterness and a kind of cold determination. So he simply remained silent, let her go to the shower, and didn't try to make a scene. Why yell when it's clear? I have the proof. Better get it together before the end, he thought. When Alicia came out of the bathroom, they exchanged a couple phrases about the weather, and that was it. She nodded to him, told him she was going to sleep, and would be ready for the evening trip to the supermarket if he wanted her. Jake only snapped back, "I'll see what I have to do for work." Confusion slid into her gaze, as if she sensed something was wrong with her husband, but they separated into different rooms. At that moment, a memory flashed through his mind. 5 years ago, summer, hot Tulsa. Alicia was a bright, cheerful girl, fresh out of nursing school and already working in an ambulance. She'd pulled into Jake's garage. He didn't have his own full service then, just a small shop set up in a rented space. Her Ford Focus car lurched for a strange reason. Something was rumbling in the engine. She walked into the shop with a bright smile, threw her bag off her shoulders, and without ceremony began to tell him how she'd been fabulously lucky to find a place that fixed things quickly and efficiently. Jake saw her eyes excited, brown, and something inside him twitched. He tried to keep it professional. "I'll be sure to take a look. It could be valve cover gasket wear." But she kept joking, touched the oil slick, and said, "If I faint from these fumes, do CPR. I'm a nurse. I have to experience this on myself." After the fix, the car had to be left in the garage for a day. She said, "How much will it cost?" "Don't worry. I'll give you a discount for pretty eyes," he replied, smiling. She nodded, turned gracefully, and walked out. But at the door, she turned around and called out loudly, "Hey, mechanic, and if I come with a pie, will it be even cheaper?" And so it began. And then the first coffee, the embarrassed conversation by the car, the first date. She seemed so charming, easygoing, ready to laugh and joke. When they got married, she was already a nurse with a decent amount of experience. They honeymooned in California, a week of driving a rented convertible along the beaches, laughing, swimming, cuddling. Back then, he was sure he'd found his other half. Returning to reality, Jake felt a searing pain in his heart. He remembered the time on their honeymoon when he'd burned his hand touching a hot grill, and Alicia had immediately rushed over with the words, "Don't you dare bear it. We'll treat it right away." The next day at the beach, she held his hand so he wouldn't be afraid of getting burned again. That's what she was like, caring, sweet, energetic. And today, she hadn't noticed that Jake had a fresh burn on his wrist from the blowtorch he'd been working with in the garage 2 days ago. And he didn't need her sympathy, but he suddenly realized, she doesn't notice me at all, doesn't look at what's happening to me. Jake couldn't live like this. He had to make sure exactly what was going on behind his back. The next day, he decided to go ahead with the plan. As if caring for his wife, he would visit her at the clinic with lunch. He made a light salad, put it in a container, and grabbed some rolls from the local bakery. He asked the receptionist where to find her. The receptionist raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Alicia? She's off duty today. She took the day off, said she was tired from the night shift." The world in front of Jake's eyes twitched again. Night shift. She herself had complained this morning about being incredibly tired and had even intended to sleep all day. But now she'd taken a night off? Something clearly didn't add up. His heart clenched and his palms sweated. He nodded to the secretary, thanked her, and left the clinic. He got into his car and remembered that Alicia had once set up geolocation sharing so they could find each other in case of an emergency. He opened an app on his smartphone and saw a dot. Alicia is 4 miles southwest. There, a street with many establishments, including hotels and restaurants, popped up on the map. She clearly wasn't home. Jake drove, holding the steering wheel so tightly that his cheekbones clenched. He didn't want to believe that was the case. Maybe she's with a friend. Maybe she's dealing with work stuff. Thoughts flashed through his head. But when he drove up to the big building of the Lakeview Inn, he noticed Alicia's car in the parking lot. He recognized it at once. A gray Nissan Altima, a slightly dented bumper he'd promised to fix. He parked nearby, trying to remain unnoticed. 20 minutes passed before 2 people came out of the hotel. Alicia and a tall man in a business suit. Yes, it was Ron, her boss, the one in the picture from the bar. He tossed his jacket carelessly over his arm and joked about something. Alicia was laughing, fixing her hair, and there was no trace of her medical gown. Now she was in a short summer dress of open blue, not meant for a modest nurse, but rather for an evening out or a nightclub. Ron leaned toward her and kissed her neck. She bowed her head and appeared to whisper something quietly to him. They parted outside Ron's car, gave each other a long look, and he drove off. Alicia remained in the parking lot, clearly in high spirits. Jake slowly picked up a smartphone and turned on the camera. He couldn't believe he was recording his own wife. But the fact remained that she was lying to him about her job, and in fact she was apparently spending time with her boss. He pulled the camera closer and filmed her leaning against her car, typing something on her phone, smiling, then getting in and starting the engine. Jake's fingers trembled on the screen. He realized this short clip and the photo from the bar were irrefutable evidence, and there was no other explanation for what the two of them were doing at the hotel that afternoon. He didn't go to her. He didn't yell. Didn't pick a fight with Ron. He just turned off the tape and drove slowly away without turning on the music, feeling a veritable tsunami raging inside. That evening, Jake waited for Alicia at home. There was no point in yanking her around and making her explain herself at the hotel. He wanted to see if she would continue the lie. The time dragged on for an agonizingly long time. Finally, at almost 10 p.m., she appeared on the doorstep, a bag of groceries in hand, a smile on her face. But as soon as she met her husband's gaze, she froze. A lone lamp burned at the living room table. Jake sat with a cup of cold coffee, his elbows resting on his knees, his back slumped. He seemed exhausted, though inside he was seething with pain and a desire to find out everything. Alicia set the bag down at the entrance and took an uncertain step toward him. "Hey, how's your day going?" She began, trying to sound casual, but her voice trembled. He lifted his head. "My day was unusual. And yours?" "It was just," she faltered, glancing at his posture, abnormally calm. "I was out with a friend, resting. After a rough night." The seconds dragged by like caramel. Jake didn't interrupt her for a long moment, then whispered, "Are you tired, Alicia? Why don't you tell me what it was like at the inn?" Her eyes widened, her hand frantically gripping the strap of her bag. She lifted her chin as if trying to pull herself together. "What hotel? What do you mean?" He didn't respond with words. He just pulled out his phone, unlocked the screen, and showed her a short video. A black and blue car, Alicia visible, Ron visible, their kiss, her laughter. The video had been taken by him a few hours earlier. She dropped the bag. The bag rustled lusciously on the floor. Shock was written all over her face. Jake turned off the video and looked up at her. "I still got the photo of you at the bar with that man yesterday. But I want to be sure. Now I know for sure." She couldn't get a word out for a few seconds. Then she squeezed out quietly. I wanted to tell you. Really, I just didn't know how to start." He clenched his teeth, but outwardly remained coldly calm. "How much?" She took her eyes to the floor. 6 months. Jake's hand trembled. 6 months. 6 months. He imagined all those days she pretended to go to work at night when she was really going to Ron's. All the excuses, all her supposed duty, all the smiles at breakfast. And he hadn't noticed a damn thing. Why, Alicia? He exhaled, and in that voice he sounded a mixture of pain, resentment, and something terribly devastated. She didn't answer immediately, her face contorted. I don't know. I'm tired of the monotony. He was so. Who cares now? Jake, I'm sorry. It just got out of hand. He stood up from the chair, keeping his gaze on her. She almost broke under his hard gaze and sank down onto the couch, clutching her bag to her. Boston the dog came out of the bedroom, watching the growing tension curiously. Alicia tried to approach her husband, but he took a step back. I thought, she spoke, that we could talk things out, change things. I don't know how I came to this. I thought you were distant, that you cared more about your garage. We were strangers. She talked a lot, choking on her words, trying to justify herself, to shift some of the blame to marital problems, but Jake just stared at her and didn't say anything. She touched his arm, and he jerked away sharply. Her lips trembled, but he only whispered, I can't listen to this right now, and walked out of the house. No yelling, no scandal. Just walked out, leaving Alicia sitting on the couch with video evidence of her betrayal. Jake spent the next few days at Trevor's. He told him that he and Alicia were having a falling out and asked him to stay with him. Trevor knew most of it, but he didn't ask for advice. He silently put a bottle of beer in front of his friend and gave him a chance to talk. Margot looked at Jake sympathetically, realizing that Alicia had apparently not only destroyed her family, but had also jeopardized her reputation at the clinic. Every day, Alicia texted, called. First, she begged for forgiveness. Then she got angry. You are all so distant. We have long lived without passion. Then again, she asked to talk. Finally, she suggested open space in the relationship, that they could admit that he wanted new sensations too. Jake saw the messages and felt that each word only made him more disgusted. He didn't want an open marriage, nor did he believe his not paying attention was the problem. Cheating is always a choice, a responsibility to the person you're building a life with. If she wanted to change, she could have told him, talked to him, broken up honestly. But to lie for months and still look him in the eye, it was heartbreaking. But he realized he was not ready to return to a house where everything is soaked in lies. Margot, who had befriended Alicia, had tried to reconcile them several times, but Jake had only grinned bitterly. He couldn't imagine trusting her now. She's breaking her principles for a moment's passion, he thought. And where was the guarantee she wouldn't find another Ron tomorrow? A week passed. Jake felt depressed, but firm in his decision. He realized he couldn't go on living like this. He needed to get his things and leave for good. One day, closer to evening, he pulled up to his house when he knew Alicia had to be there. He entered, and his heart was pounding in his chest. After all, so many years of life together. But already on the threshold, he felt that he was finally firm. He didn't need any more clarity, no more explanations. Alicia came out of the bedroom, looking distressed, with tear-stained eyes, wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans. Her face expressed either remorse or fear of loss. She rushed over to him. Jake, I'm ready to end this, I swear. I'll quit. I'll get another job. Anything to keep us together. I've been a fool. It's all messed up. I'm sorry. Tears rolled down her face. She tried to hug him, but he gently pulled away, went into the bedroom, pulled a suitcase out of the closet. He began to put his shirts, jeans, and jacket in it. Alicia stood beside him, unable to believe it could end like this. You loved me, didn't you? I know it's still there somewhere. Tell me we can start over, she whispered, clutching the edge of his shirt. Jake closed the suitcase and turned to her. His gaze was calm, but there was deep-seated pain in it. Alicia, he said softly, you left me the night you decided to go to the bar instead of the clinic. When you drank from his hands, when you lied to me about the night shift. Maybe you didn't realize it then, but that's when you left. She sobbed, covering her face with her palms. He squeezed the handle of his suitcase and exhaled heavily. Then he added briefly, I can't live with a man I don't trust. I don't know how to forgive that. And walked out. Alicia ran after him to the porch, trying to stop him, but he could no longer hear her pleas. She screamed his name, but she felt the sound lodged in her throat, drowned in the evening air. Jake walked toward the car, feeling himself shake off the shackles of lies and deceit. For the first time in a long time, he was breathing fully. His back straightened, as if a huge, heavy bag had slid off his shoulders. The sun was setting. The city was fading into twilight. But for him, it was as if a bright light had risen again. He put the suitcase in the trunk, got behind the wheel, and drove out of the yard without looking back. In his mind, he said goodbye to the house, to Alicia, and to the past that had crumbled under her lies. The mood was not joyous, but resolute, almost liberated. 2 months passed. Jake rented a small house on the outskirts of Tulsa, took Boston with him, filed for divorce. For a while, he'd been wringing his hands at a car service, overworking just to keep his mind off things. He expanded the service. He hired a second mechanic, started making short videos for his YouTube channel, sharing tips on fixing cars. People liked his unhurried, calm style of explanation. Subscribers began to grow, and with it, his confidence in the future. Alicia tried to win him back. She came to the service once, standing quietly at the gate, but he only shook his head and shut himself inside so he wouldn't see her tears. A little later, he learned that she had been fired from Mercy Health after all. Technically, it was for ethics violations, but it was clear to everyone. After her affair with the head doctor had been rumored, the management didn't want a scandal. And Ron quickly found new night assistant, or perhaps switched to another employee. Alicia was left alone. One day she came to his house, her hair disheveled, no makeup, looking aged and tired. She cried, begging for a new start, saying she'd realized everything and lost everything. Jake listened, looking at her through the closed door. But there was no more warmth in his heart for this woman. The love had been burned away, and he realized he couldn't go back to the trust that had been in their marriage for 6 years. "I'm not your home anymore, Alicia. You burned it down yourself," he said firmly before slamming the door shut. His heart ached, but he knew there was no turning back. And rightly so. Gone was the bright, cheerful girl he'd fallen in love with. In her place was a man who had betrayed for passion and gain. He couldn't and wouldn't live with her. A few more months passed. He had a calmer outlook on life. He tried not to talk about the past, turned over a new leaf. He went about his business, making video car reviews, talking to clients, and spending his evenings reading a book on business strategies. Gradually, he felt an inner freedom from pain. One day, Allison, a red-haired girl with huge eyes full of quiet sadness, came to his service station in an old Chevy. The transmission needed to be fixed. They got to talking, and she turned out to be an open and warm person. He invited her for coffee at a nearby diner. Then they took a walk in the park together. No promises, no pressure, just companionship. After a while, Jake smiled more often, found pleasure in the simple things. He didn't expect a trick from every person he met anymore. And with each passing day, he felt he was learning to trust people anew, but this time carefully, without illusions. Alicia? Rumor had it she'd left Tulsa. Took a job at a clinic in another state, somewhere east of Arkansas. They said she was having financial difficulties because her reputation was ruined at her old place. But life went on, and no one asked, "Where's Alicia?" or "When will she be back?" In Tulsa, they remembered her as the one who worked nights, and then many still only shook their heads. For Jake himself, however, it was the past, a hard but survivable lesson. One evening he stood at the gate of the car service center, holding a mug with a sign that read, "Trust isn't given. It's earned. Trust isn't given. It has to be earned." He smiled to himself, remembering how many times Alicia had taken his trust and just threw in the dirt. Now he knew, you have to pick people you can trust, and there's no shame in checking. The only thing that really left warm memories were the joyful moments they'd had after all. But they dissolved into his present like a ghost of the past. Looking up at the setting sun, Jake took a sip of coffee from his mug. The dachshund, named Boston, wagged his tail and yapped softly, as if asking his owner, "Are you okay?" He smiled and quietly said to the dog, "Come on, buddy, we have a lot of things to do. And anyway, there's a new life ahead of us." He didn't know what exactly awaited him next, but he still felt that for the first time in a long time, he was breathing easily. And that's where today's story ends. Thank you for watching to the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and comment. We'd love to discuss this story with you. See you in the next video.